There's a lot of Dumbles around here, but they're not real Dumbles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If there's one amp company it's okay to have fake amps of, feels like that one. You know what I mean?
I do.
He went crazy. He started making shotguns later in his life. Do you know this?
You've told me, but yes.
I have no idea.
Yeah, so he retreated to the Santa Cruz Mountains. He stopped talking on the telephone. He went real.
Conspiracy theory?
Everyone is a conspiracy theorist
Yeah.
in the guitar pedal world. Like, you get under the hood a little bit, you
Interesting.
realize they're all everyone's building stuff.
Really?
It's that engineer bend. How does stuff work? Oh, it works different than I thought it would.
So they're going to figure out the government.
Everything
Okay.
must work different than I first thought
right.
it worked.
Yes.
You know, what's really going on
Circuits.
here?
Yeah.
You know, it's a type of person,
Huh.
but they're all a little, you know,
Right.
delve in there. You meet somebody, start talking to them a little bit. You know?
Speaking of Dumbles, the most knowledge I have about it is that I know that John Mayer loves it.
Yes.
And I was listening to that Corey Wong podcast that he
Yep.
does, which is incredible.
Wong notes.
Yes.
Yes.
And John was like, I plugged it in this amp. And Corey was like, cool. Like, that was my interpretation of how I heard that experience. And it's like
Yes.
this $100,000 amp. And Corey would have been completely fine just plugging straight into the interface.
Right.
And he was like, oh, cool. I guess I'll plug into your $100,000 amp.
Yeah.
And it was like the most amazing interview podcast. And I was like glued to I think I was like on an airplane listening to it. And I was like, Corey could care less.
No,
that he's playing
completely,
that amp.
completely
Oh,
care
that's
less.
so funny.
Completely care less. It's an interesting thing. It's you don't want to copy other people's stuff, but if there's one thing you're allowed to copy, it's that.
Yeah.
It's so unobtainium. It's so like shrouded in mystery, and probably everything I know about Dumbles is wrong because it's like from the internet. Mm-hmm. So who knows anything for real? But it's definitely in the eye of the beholder. Like, the beauty's in the eye of the beholder. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, this is Guitar Friends episode number 11.
Wow.
Kevin, introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Kevin Schuck.
Uh-huh.
Here from Nashville, Tennessee. So I drove a hopping 20 minutes
Yeah.
to
20
get to
minutes.
Tone Junkie.
Dang.
And that was my tactful way of saying, I didn't know if I've been saying your last name wrong this whole time.
Wow.
So now
You
I
wanna
know
know-
I have
now you
not.
nailed
You want
it.
to know my trick? Is if you ever cannot pronounce or don't know someone's name, you like, hey, how do you spell that? I want to put that in my phone. And then they repeat it back to you because no one's going to shame you for
Right.
how do you spell a name.
Right.
Or they're like, dude, it's Smith. And you're like, oh, I know, but I didn't know if it was spelled with a Y.
Right.
And you can make it funny.
Oh, wow.
But it's like, dude, how do you spell your last name?
Interesting.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
guess I could have done that. I could have been like, how do you spell your last name? I could have sent this via text. Please tell me in a voice memo.
I was going to say, because spelling it might not help you pronounce it, though, right? And that's your issue.
This has to be in person, though, right?
Because they'll usually say it back.
Yeah,
You're
and
saying-
how many times do we meet
see.
people like on the road or at church?
Yeah.
And it's like there's little techniques. It's like repeat their name 3 times, and it's like everything like that. So you want to be genuine with people.
Yes.
And so it's like that's one of the techniques I've learned is it's like just, hey, how do you spell your name? Because then it shows investment into them. It's
Right.
It's authentic. I want
Right.
to know. I want to know.
See, I've
This-
always been afraid to ask that question because they're like Joe. And you're like, no, I just, how do you, I guess you could say, I didn't know there was a,
Yeah, you
an
will
E in
get,
that.
but most of the time,
Yes.
it's like,
Yeah, it's something different. Yeah.
yeah.
Look, this is a type of knowledge, sharing on Guitar Friends.
Well, yeah.
Kevin, show us some cool sounds. You got a big board there. I'm going to get...
Yeah,
gonna-
it's fine. I have a big board, and I'll probably just use spring reverb the whole time.
Yeah, right. You got a big board there, and I'm gonna we're gonna add some B-roll in right here, and look at that.
Little
Lovely.
sound example.
There we go.
Love
Yeah.
that.
That's
What was on just now?
What
were
are we listening
hearing?
to?
Yeah, so a buddy of mine, Dan McKenzie, who's a bass player for like Bethel and Jesus Culture, said, dude, one of the greatest things is to start your chain with a amp in a box kind of pedal and set that like super clean, but anything before or after that is going to be imparted with that sound.
Right.
So the big thing is I'm running that Universal Audio Ruby, which is an incredible pedal, but sometimes I want it to sound a little bit more like a Fender or a Silvertone, and that's what this does. Is it kind of helps EQ shift me into that world. So that was with the Silvertone pedal on, and then the Protein just adding a little grit.
Right.
So I'll turn that on and off, and it's more not a gain change; it's more of a like feeling. So that's on. So it adds some of those mids that I'm used to like hitting like an old Silvertone amp with.
Yeah. And what do you do with the stomp?
Yeah, that is my catch-all.
Whatever you
run a set list almost. Because I have like fun pedals on here that I'll flip on out. Like I got like the stereo chorus or like a vibrato, which these Behringer pedals are incredible.
Dude, they're awesome. I've had a bunch of them.
Yeah.
Don't kick them too hard.
Dude, this thing has been around the world.
Really?
Yeah, it's as people joke that they're not like.
Yeah.
I've had zero issues.
Yeah.
Like I've broken Boss pedals, and
I think the challenge on them, you've got it set up the right way. If you put it on a board and leave it there, you're good.
Yeah.
It's the in and out of the jacks.
Yeah.
Because they're on the PCB, and the in and out of the power. I've had the power supply break on those.
Yeah.
When I'm just plugging them in and out and tossing them around. But the way you've got, I mean, the switch is probably going to work great.
Yeah. The stomp though is like you can see I have a song up there. So one of the artists I play for is named Patrick Mayberry.
Yeah.
And we did a set, and what I do is is with like the quartz here, I'll send tempo changes and set list changes to that, and I'll have a bunch of presets pulled up to help get me through set lists.
Right.
And then I have a bunch of the other stuff for like studio settings. So it's kind of the hybrid thing. I can bring one rig and do live and studio work efficiently in both ways. Because for the studio thing, I'm always wanting to bend down and twist
change
knobs,
stuff.
do that. And that's more when I lean on the analog pedals. And then for the live stuff, like the quickness of sets, I'll lean more on the digital side of everything.
That's cool.
Sure. Yeah. You want everything to change with one button press. Okay, so you spend your days hanging around a lot of great gear.
Yeah.
Is that the understatement of the year?
Yeah. So what my day job is I work at Vintage King Audio.
Oh, look, I have my sweatshirt on right here.
Oh, this whole
Look at that.
Yeah. And dude, it's the most fun company to work for.
Yeah.
Because over in East Nashville, we have a fully functioning recording studio.
Yeah.
And you can come in and demo any piece of gear that you can think of in the studio world, from speakers, like monitors, to microphones, preamps, outboard gear. Like we even do a bunch of guitar pedals. And the idea is you can come in, figure out what sound you're needing to then take that home and cut the record with it.
Right.
So it's like a singer can come in and say like, I'm trying to get this vocal, and we can say, here's a 251 or an 87 or man, here's an SM7B. Like what's going to work for your record? And then we'll let them sing into them, do the whole thing. And then it's like, oh, that's going to work. That fits the sound.
Right.
And then we do that. And that's kind of why I brought this whole rack of gear. Is all of these are preamps except for the last two things. And what you guys were hearing in the beginning was an API preamp.
Yeah.
And so a big part of getting a recorded sound is knowing which preamp to go into and what characteristics it's going to impart to your sound.
Kevin, that can't possibly be right, because everybody knows that guitar players need transparency. We need the tone to be 100% original, untouched. We don't want any. You're telling me that those mic pre's are not true bypass?
Not at all. No.
What's the opposite of that?
This is one of the great, like, this is sort of one of the great, like, follow me down the rabbit hole, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like, guitar players have all of these devices that are designed to distort, break up, create a sound.
Yeah.
And then we have all of these devices that are like, I don't want this to touch my sound.
Yep.
But I want it to do something.
Mm-hmm.
Not nothing, but almost nothing.
Yeah.
And we're one of the last instruments, I think, that even in the process of like going digital, we don't go digital, or we don't consider all the way through the signal chain.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? Like even now in the era of digital, like it used to be guitar players cut off at the amp. It's like you build your rig from finger to string, through the pickups, all of the pedals, everything, to the amp, and then we stop.
Yep.
Right? And then at some point that starts changing. In the studio it changes, probably in the 80s. You get guys starting to bring their own effects. Give me the mic, and I'll just send you an XLR.
Yep.
It starts changing there. But still, like for live guitar playing, we just go, this is my rig. It ends at the amp. The microphone, that's a sound guy's responsibility.
Oh, yeah.
And then even now with digital, we end it at the IR, or the post reverb, post delay. But we don't, even our modeling gear, you don't really see a ton of companies going, oh, and by the way, here's an API pre that you can put at the end of your chain. By the way, here's an 1176 that you can put as the last thing. If anything, what's ironic is we probably now have modeling companies modeling like a studio compressor that was built into a guitar pedal, right? Like so they're modeling the model of the thing. But you're saying it makes a big difference what preamp you might...
huge. It's crazy.
Yes.
Because right now we're playing through the API.
Yeah.
And the two first here is the API and then a Neeve 1073.
Yep.
And these are going to be the most familiar, most like for sound, what people are, it's like basically like your Fender and your Marshall or your Fender and your Vox. It's like you have the American and then you have your British.
In general, how would you describe, I'll tell you how I would describe in general these two styles of sound.
Yeah, the API to me is always super quick on the transients and super percussive.
Yeah.
So it's like when you're playing guitar, the notes are going to kind of have that zing.
Yes.
It's when you crank it, it has a beautiful mid-range. And API, it's an American-made company, and it sounds like American rock and roll because all these studios that were being built had API consoles.
Yes.
And so when you think of a lot of American rock and roll guitar-based music, you're hearing a lot of API.
Yeah.
On the other side of things, when you go to the Neeve, this is like England, British. They like when you think of those records or those sounds and the studios that were over there, it's a lot of Neeve. Obviously, people were buying studio gear and shipping it across the seas. You could get a Marshall in America or a Fender over in Britain. Like that's very doable. But that's the kind of the separation. The Neeve to me,
but like when you go shop for amps, all the greatest old Marshalls, you always look, and it's always like in the UK, in Spain, in France. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Same thing. Old Voxes, you're like, oh, I need an old AC. They're always back there.
Yep.
And I'm sure they feel that way about our stuff. Yeah.
But the Neeve to me is it's going to have a little bit of a softer low end, and the music and music ear is so subjective. So my ears, in my opinion, can be different than what you hear or what you hear. But the general consensus that I hear is Neeve is it's a little bit kind of gushier and saturation. Like when people think of Neeve, it's the saturation that you can get. So when you dime a Neeve, it's like it's going to hit, it's going to saturate, and it's going to add extra everything that you're wanting at the back end of your recorded signal.
Yeah.
And when you think you're trying to mix a guitar into a track, you can EQ it, but also the way that the dynamics or the presence of it, it's going to help you sit into a track.
Yeah.
Like
I've always felt like the Neeve sound is sometimes like an airy, breathy.
Yeah.
There's like, you feel a little more, I don't want to say presence in that it's bright, but I feel a little more like maybe I'm in the room. And to me, the API sound, I've always described it as hot. I always describe it as a hot sound. To me, when you run stuff through an API, it sounds like, oh, they must have recorded that guitar loud. Even at a low volume, it sounds like a loud guitar.
It's a circuit difference. The API does not have an input transformer. It just has an output transformer.
Okay.
So you're like literally just slamming the front end of it, and it's super powerful. The Neeve has an input and an output transformer. So when you get it, it'll be a little bit softer. It'll be a little bit more full frequency, airy, kind of like what you're describing, because of literally how the circuit is, the signal is going through it.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. I've always thought some sounds, like Stevie's guitar sound, I don't think he used an API, but he would play clean, and for some reason when I listen, I go, that sounds like the loudest clean I've ever heard. Like, it sounds like that must have been 1,000,000 decibels when they recorded it.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like, it doesn't sound soft, even though I'm hearing a clean guitar. It's in the track. It's mixed.
Yep.
It's not louder than everything else. But I go, that just sounds like it was loud when it was recorded.
Yeah.
You know, and, the Neeve's always... but you know what? Maybe I sometimes attribute to a Neeve maybe what I would attribute also to a ribbon mic.
Yeah.
Because maybe a popular combination, maybe not. You know what I mean? I don't really know what. Sometimes I don't know what's the preamp and what's the mic. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah. And that's kind of why we decided when we were talking about this is to go digital into this.
Yeah.
So we're not playing with a bunch of microphone options. It's like you're hearing the Universal Audio Ruby, which is just an AC30, which everyone's pretty familiar with. And when I'll go through, and I'll actually hand you my guitar so we can go through and listen to all of these.
That's cool.
Because I'll kind of give you the rundown. So the Millennial here is, if I can, this is going to be super clean. Like, think of like almost uncolored, super clean, where the 511 is going to be super modern sounding.
Yeah.
And this is, when I say modern, think like the difference of a recording between the 70s and then like the 2000s.
Sure.
Like there's just a whole different edge to that.
Yeah.
This retro is a full tube pre. Right. Everything else here has been solid state. And this has 3, it's not the 12AX7. What's the one that's less gain?
The AT?
AT, yeah, or AU7.
AU is even less, yeah.
Yeah. So this is a full tube pre. So the way when you get into it, it'll actually start compressing and saturating like kind of a tube amp. If you're a guitar player familiar with that. So these are really cool, but also not cool if you're trying to go for a certain sound. Like you wouldn't necessarily put a pristine, clean female pop vocal through a little champ amp.
Right.
It's kind of the same thing. And then the Shadow Hills, the reason this is so cool is you have different transformer options. So it's like the Neeve transformer is going to sound like the Neeve transformer. The Shadow Hills, you can flip between the different transformer options and hear literally different sounds just on different transformers.
Yeah.
And then in the rack, just because when you're getting into this level, I have a very standard EQ, which is the API, and this is super musical, and then a little tube compression as well too. So you can kind of get a finished guitar signal, and we'll change the preamp. So when we do these examples, I'll leave these two on, the EQ and the compression. Yeah. So everything is super
And what
even.
do we just for reference? What are we doing with the EQ? Looks like little touches, but I can't. You know, they're stacked knobs, so it's hard to see where the value is.
So that was on, and then turn it off. So it's just a little more everything better kind of thing. And in this context, it's super wide and full frequency. If I was putting this on a track, I'd probably carve out a little bit more of that low end.
Sure.
But for us, it's just fun to feel
so
the low end.
Guitar by itself in the room, big.
Yeah. So just so I understand, so like, is it like a pedal board where they're going from one to the next, or is it like what's on?
So on the back there's XLRs, and normally this would have a patch bay associated with it, where you'd have little TT cables, and you would just plug in and say, I want to use the API. I'm going to route that into the compressor, into the EQ, or whatever signal chain you're making. But it's exactly like pedals.
Okay. So when you were playing, we were hearing the API preamp and some other things?
Yes. So before, we are in the API, and then the EQ and the compression.
Okay, those three. Okay.
So that's EQ off, EQ in. And we can do the like dump the low end, and you can do that if you're trying to get it to fit into a mix. That G string.
As you play authentic, that's how you know
Here
it's a
on
real
the
good
Guitar
sound.
Friends.
Yes. So what I'll do now is I'll flip from that API this preamp.
So do you want to take us through, Kevin, like each of the one? We'll go one to the other, to the other, to the other.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, let's do that. And I'll have Suze play the guitar here.
So which one's this one?
So now we are in the Neeve 1073. So this is the other like very classic food group of everything.
Yep.
And to me, it's like that high end is a little bit more like silky and smooth, and where the API, the transient, was a lot quicker,
right?
Like that. So this is super nitty gritty. If you keep playing, I'll do a quick switch.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so the only thing that we changed was the preamp, and that's a completely different sound.
Yeah,
right.
Totally.
What are you hearing when you hear that?
I heard a little bit more of that high end, I think, come through on the second one.
Yeah.
Was that the API? Mm-hmm. Okay. And maybe a little bit of that attack that you were talking about. Just even playing it, you feel like kind of more immediate, like less squishy, I guess, as the other one you were saying. So
exactly.
Almost like I mean, it's not the same, but like a compressor went on and off, between the two. Like a compressor got added with the API,
Yeah.
All right, jump back to the API for a minute. I want to hear that. Suze, play a little like...
We're in the API right now.
Okay,
yeah.
Play a little like thing, and then I'll, and then play the same thing again with the Neeve. Like a little, a little... And now we're in the Neeve, right?
Yep, we're in the Neeve. They're close on gain. The other thing too is we can play with the gain. So keep playing, and I'm going to crank the preamp gain, and you're going to hear all that crackle, harmonic, and distortion that you might not use, or you could totally fit onto a track.
Right.
So when I got up into the gain, you can hear it kind of like ducks itself. You have more gain, more saturation.
Yeah.
The other thing that you got to do is when you increase the preamp gain, you have your trim pot to keep the output the same. So it's kind of like on a guitar amp, you have your master. You have a master pretty much.
Yeah.
So I hope we're not clipping your interface.
Yeah.
But I think we're good.
We're good.
Yeah.
We're good.
But that's
really cool. Now, do you have a favorite between those two, or is it just like all about use case?
It's really about use case.
Okay.
Like I know that if I'm doing like big rhythm, edge of breakup, semi clean, and I want it to like punch and hit, I'm probably going to lean towards the API.
Yeah.
If I'm doing like a slide solo with like tons of like humped mid range, and I want it to be a little gushy and fit in the mix, I'm going to go Neeve.
Right.
The other thing too is if you're running a stereo rig, which I do a lot, I'll do 2 different preamps on either side.
No.
Oh yeah.
You can't. How against the rules?
Yeah. So you'd usually record mono when you're doing like recording sessions.
Sure.
But there's some cases that
Stop it, Kevin. These are going to color our sound, and we're going to record mono.
Right.
But
what
sometimes
about my triple wide stereo verb that I am run? That's left and right, and
there's some cases that you want to differentiate the two. And so if you're miking a real amp, you have a Fender on one side and a Vox on the other. You can get them to even sit farther in the mix and have their own space by what preamp or EQ or anything like that. We're talking about preamps today.
Yeah.
But
That's
you
cool.
can differentiate them even more, and then they're going to help with phasing, help with places in the mix.
Sure.
Yeah.
Wow. So are you walking into a studio with this and telling the engineer I want to use these as part of my chain?
You can.
Okay.
one of the reasons that you would book a specific studio is what gear they already have. So you were talking about like guitar players, our stuff usually ends at the amp. And then the sound guy or the producer or the engineer, whoever you're working with, will take it from there and with their microphone choices. And that's where it's like when you're hiring a producer or someone or a sound guy, you're trusting them and their sound. So if I were to hire someone or book a studio, I'm booking them for the sound of their console, for their mic collection, for their preamp collection. And it's like the joke is Mariah Carey will not go to a studio unless there's a Sony AC800 and a CL1B. Right. And it's like that's part of her sound. And
what a joke.
And she's or it's almost Christmas time, right?
Yeah. We all love it.
Yeah. But that's the idea is that's her thing. And so she's booking a studio for the gear that they already have.
Yes.
But for a lot of us, we're home recording or doing our thing is so huge. So we're starting to get into this world.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And there's also guitar players that are now taking little lunch boxes like this to gigs.
Yes.
My buddy Tyler, who plays for Morgan Wallen, has built a rig like this that travels with him on the road. So literally what you said before from the 80s, with the racks of gear, Tyler's handing in front of house 2 XLR lines. And they're like, don't use a preamp. I already got my sound crafted. And every night he's consistent with his sound.
That's that.
That's really cool.
That's that novice guitar player gentleman with a sensible haircut.
Sensible. The mohawk. Yeah.
Okay, so take us through a couple more of these. This is Now we're leaving classic world.
Hold on, Suze is tuning upside down right now.
Well, you just gotta adjust which way you move the thing, you know?
He thinks the E is a 3.
Right.
Okay. That was amazing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey.
So
guitar friends.
Okay, what are these next two?
Yeah, so the next one is the Burl and the Millennia, and Burl is going to be just the next step. Think more modern, more of everything. You're going to have increased headroom, but also increased tone. I don't know how to say that in another thing. And then the Millennia is going to be super clean, hi-fi sounding.
Yeah.
So I brought this as an example. I would not necessarily use this on guitar. I would use this more on a vocal or a piano where I'm really trying to have a very uncolored preamp sound.
Yeah.
So
just using it for volume, basically.
Exactly, just to gain it up.
This is the Burl.
This is the Burl, yeah. So you can hear, like I've brought the gain back, and it cleans up the whole signal. It's like we do have an overdriven signal on. We have the blue side of the protein on, and we're hitting the ruby a little bit hard. So just normally there's a little bit, but then you can get your guitar to have more gain on the back end.
Right.
And when you crank it, the spring reverb that's on the HX Stomp starts to have a little bit of grit to it as well. So I'll bring you through the gain range on this. That's starting to get to a sound I might not use. That's like really slamming.
It's distorting. It's like adding a...
So it's kind of like we always want to find the edge or breakup sound on guitar amps because that's when it kind of comes alive and blooms. You're kind of doing that when you're working on the gate staging of a preamp. You're going to find the sweet spot with your output trim, like your master volume. Right. And I think it was about here.
Gotcha. Okay.
Most preamps come with a meter or a light to let you know if you're clipping the preamp itself.
So that like really deep sag and like thump, is that from the compressor's on at the end, right? Like down here?
Yeah, these are set very minimally.
Okay, so I'm hearing a lot of the
You're hearing the preamp.
Yeah, it's just like kind of...
I honestly put the compressor in this rig, so all of these will get leveled out.
Gotcha.
in post. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's a cool sound. I mean, are we able to easily hear like no preamp? Like if we were just hearing the board?
Would be the Millennia.
Oh.
This is going to be clean
segue.
gain. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. So this is close to what your board's actually putting out in terms of...
Yes. So like showing up to a gig, front of house, and I'm like with the Daiso Plus here, this is what they would take in their lines.
Gotcha.
So this is as clean as what front of house would get if I show up to a gig.
Okay.
And for me, so all the gain is coming from the pedal board.
Okay.
And then if we go back to the Burl, you're going to get that body from the preamp.
That's really interesting. It's almost like we changed amps. You know, went from like a clean Fender into like a overdriven Marshall or something. You know?
Yeah. And that's running that pretty hot. I mean, you know,
like pushed.
Yeah, so we're really pushing the Burl, but that's where the dynamics and the harmonics is a word we haven't used.
Right.
You can gain so many natural harmonics and that feel play, that special zing that's coming out of the studio monitor or however you're referencing.
Interesting.
I don't know if you guys use like plugins. The way to audition some of these, like if you're just like, man, I have no idea what sound I want, is pretty much every company that makes plugins will do like a 14-day free trial.
Yes,
like I know like Universal Audio is the example I'm thinking of, is you can test any of their plugins.
Right.
And so you can say like, hey, I'm going to do this, but on the digital side and say, man, this is what an API sounds like, a 1073 or a tube pre, which we'll get to. And then you can tone test all of these if you're going to invest the money into buying the hardware or buying the plugin or anything like that.
Yeah. Right. So you could actually just record one guitar take and then just swap out the after the fact, like just put it on the channel and hear the difference. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. The reason that I still prefer hardware on stuff like this is the same, pretty much the same reason people still prefer real amps in certain scenarios, is you're going to have this 3D-ness or this shoulder or just this more musical harmonic. Plugins and amp emulation has gotten so good that like for me in my ears, hearing back, I don't hear a difference. It's all about the feel or the use case.
Oh, that's true. And that goes to why we've talked about so many times. In a mix, you can't tell what someone's playing. You can't tell if it's a Helix or a Kemper or a Quad Cortex or it was an amp or a Tone X. You can't tell once stuff's been done to it.
Right.
But if you were the guitar player, you know there's big differences. You notice it, you feel it, there's all the but you just eyes closed, you hear some band pop on the radio or you hear something live. You can't discern their gear. No.
But it's that idea of doing something good and something great. Yeah. When you have analog outboard gear, it's going to take it from good, you're making art, to like, this is great. Yeah. And that's why when people master records, they still throw it through analog gear.
Sure.
Like any mastering engineer, sure, they're going to use plugins. They're going to have a rack of outboard gear that's going to enhance everything. Because there's something about physical electricity running through and hitting transformers and the unpredictableness of the sag, the harmonics that gets added, that's just musical. It still is.
That's cool.
The next thing down the line is this Rupert Nee 511.
511.
And this, if you're going to do one preamp to do it all, this is the one. And the reason is because they've built in what they call the silk feature.
And this is the modern
the more modern
design, right?
Yes.
Is this sort of is this a classic Neeve design? It's by the current Rupert Neve company, but this is like their more modern. Is that is that correct?
Yes. So Neeve, like this one, and then Rupert Neve Designs, they're two different companies.
Yes. Yeah.
And this one it can do the Neeve sound, it can do the API sound. It's going to be the cover all basis kind of things because it has this like silk texture control to allow you to blend in certain amounts of harmonics, saturation, things like that. So let's listen to this one. So what I was doing was I kind of played with the input gain and then played with the Silk's feature, which allows you to blend in kind of what that saturation harmonics content is. Yeah.
So would you kind of set up your board first to sound like you could use that sound without any of this and then go here?
Yes.
Because I hear like you could sculpt your sound a lot with just these.
Oh, yeah.
But you're trying to get it right here first and then go, cool, let's add on top of that. Okay.
Yeah, because my pedal board is, I have set it up to plop down in a studio, plop down in a live setting, and to do both. So I have this set up exactly what
even
it is.
without this.
Without this. And then this is the extra, I'm tone shaping to get the energy that a preamp can add or whatever, the EQ, to get it to fit into a record.
That's cool. So have you recorded with this and used like every preamp on one gig?
Or no, I actually built this just to come over here.
Yeah, right.
Nice. Okay, gotcha.
But
because this would be a little redundant.
This is very redundant.
Very redundant.
Options galore.
Yes. Normally, it's like if you're building a vocal chain, you're going to do a really good preamp, really good EQ, really good compression, and you can get away with 3 spaces essentially.
Gotcha.
And some of these units will be larger; they'll take up multiple, like the compressor. They'll be large units.
Yeah,
right?
You can do a single compressor, or they do like 3 spaces.
But it looks way better, right? Doesn't
you can
it?
see it.
Bigger is better.
Yeah, that's true.
The other thing too is if we were tracking a band, like doing drums, I would probably want to do the same preamp across drums to give more of a consistent sound. Because if you have the Neeve on a kick and then an API on the snare, it's going to sound more like records we're familiar with because they were literally they had a Neeve console or an API console.
Right. Yeah.
So that's more traditional. Obviously, there's art. There's no rules. You can do whatever you want. Yeah. Most of the time, art is made out of. I always think of the Billie Eilish record. Her whole record was done on an Apollo Twin and a Neumann 103. The whole rig is like $2,000, and she won how many awards for that thing?
Right.
So there's no rules.
I just found out about her on Guitar Friends episode 4 or 5, like pretty recently.
Amazing.
Yeah, I never heard of her before.
Amazing.
Is that shocking to you?
A little.
It's actually funny how Suze lacks a lot of. There's eras of music that somehow he has remained completely blind to.
That's okay.
Some of it's the modern stuff, but some of it is like some pretty like.
Yeah.
Suze, have you ever heard Kiss? And I'd be like, I don't think I've ever listened to Kiss. Is that one that we
couldn't
discovered?
name a single song by them?
And then it'd be like, have you heard a Kiss record? It's like maybe not.
Maybe like on a movie soundtrack.
Yeah,
see. But did you guys have parents that thought it was Knights in Satan's Service? Like, are there bands? Is it that?
For sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I was in the Christian bubble. I mean,
like, were you shielded from it?
100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you went through the 100 greatest records.
Well, that was sort of me, like, getting into these kind of conversations where everyone's shocked. I was like, okay, how do I educate myself? So I did the Rolling Stone like top 500 albums of all time.
Sure.
I listened through every single one of them. It took me about 2.5 years, but it was enlightening. I mean, it's like all this music I was not aware of, and somebody thought these were good enough to put in this list. You know? So
tons of Michael Bolton on that list.
There was maybe a couple. More the Beatles and
but there was some Michael
Pet
Bolton.
Sounds and stuff like that. But yeah, no, this is super fascinating. All this stuff is fascinating.
It is
to me.
fascinating. I want to hear this.
You mentioned cost. Sorry, what would be like an average cost of one of these? I'm sure they range.
Yes, you're on the average end about $1,000 per
unit.
Per unit.
Okay.
Some are going to be 800, some are 1,200.
Like buying an amp, basically. I mean,
But you kind of get in this world, like especially in Nashville, you can find Cappies all over the place, like used. And Cappy, did it start out as just kits you can build?
I think that's still their bread and butter.
But do they have pre-built stuff though? I think
there's dudes that build Cappy.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, but that was like you were saying, like. Everyone went to this form factor of 500 series stuff. And so then you've got all these API boards everywhere that are different circuits. And so then people want this pre, that pre, this pre, but it only exists in this form factor. One of them exists or 5 of them exist in this form factor that's a whole board sold to a studio, right?
Right.
And so to get that, it's like someone's got to put it down in a 500 series. So, my point in saying all that is You've got Warm Audio. You've got Cappy. There's all these other
like
brands.
Knockoffs of these.
Yeah, just like guitar amps.
Yeah.
You've got Black Star. And they've got something like an AC30, and you might be able to pull it up and get a very AC30-ish tone.
Right.
But it's a different amp. It's a different thing. But it's sort of like, I don't even want to say in the style of, but there's definitely some nods and like influences.
Are you almost close enough to like the karaoke version?
I mean, Warm is straight up making their stuff look like the stuff that's out there.
Clones
I mean, they're not. It's almost like clones. And I mean, now we've seen them do clones and some guitar pedals. Warm Audio has jumped over to there.
Oh.
I think, you tell me if I'm right or wrong here, Kevin.
Yeah.
I think when you get into that world, just like guitar, just like Behringer, you get into varying levels of accuracy. You may have a model that's like, this is pretty accurate to that circuit. And then you get some other stuff that's like, this sort of looks like it only. This is like does not have that sound.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I think Josh Scott explained it best when he talked about trade dress.
Yeah.
Like, if you're ripping off someone's artistic thing, that's like the no-no. And that's why a lot of people really get mad at Warm. They're by far the biggest offender right now. I think if you're going to say Bryce, dude that is like the president or the owner of Warm, his whole thing is like, I'm making gear that is unattainable or not in production. So like when he did the Warm Klon or the Warm CL1B, the WA1B is what they call it.
Yes.
It's because those things are unattainable either by price or waitlist. To get a real CO1B studio compressor, they're made new, it's a 2 to 3 year waitlist.
Right.
So that's where it's up for grabs.
Right.
So it's like you're talking about like the moral issue or the trade dress issue, but then technology is literally just parts put together in a certain way.
Sure.
And
everything they're making, every plug Waves has a version of it.
Oh yeah.
Every plug-in suite has a version of all those things. So it's like everybody can buy the digital version. And we all know, I mean, Fender just put out they might be the most copied company in the guitar world in terms of amps and amp simulation, just because they have so many amps.
Yeah.
And now they have a tube screamer. It's not licensed tube screamer.
Yeah.
AC30 is not a licensed AC30. And so in the software world, it's all done.
Yep.
Warm is kind of I see, and that is true. And what was the compressor you were just saying? The CL.
It's a TubeTech CO1B. That's like one of the most famous studio compressors.
They're not selling any less of those.
No.
If anything, it adds to the mystique and the lore, right?
Yeah.
Because if Bill Finnegan starts making, is that his name? He starts making a clone again, and he occasionally does make a couple new clones. They show up on eBay. They're gone like that.
Right.
It's not like he even ripped himself off with the KTR. I mean, he basically made his own rip off, right?
That's funny.
And sold that, and still the clones are.
Well, it's not a clone.
Well, the new Nada clone, right? Is a Nada.
Being a dad, I am so excited. I told my wife, I was like, please get this for my Christmas present.
Yes.
Because I want to literally get on the kitchen table, get the Goop out, and just like I could get a clone or a clone pedal. It was about the experience of it. Like, I love that. So
we're going to build
it on the
one
show.
live. We have one coming, and we're going to build it on the show while we talk about it.
Are you going to Goop just that little circle, or are you going to do the whole thing?
So the thing I did find out about the Goop is you have to wait 24 hours for the Goop to dry.
I don't Goop it.
So for the episode when we do it, we won't Goop it. We'll plug it in and try it. Later, I'll go back and Goop it.
Okay.
They also did warn you can Goop the entire pedal if you want. However, it will make the unit unserviceable. If you just Goop in the basically
area,
Goop in the circle, you still got a warranty.
Right.
Goop outside the circle, no warranty.
Wow.
Now it won't break the pedal, but their point is it's unserviceable.
They don't want to get in there, and we're past all that.
But we're $99. I'm probably not sending that in
just
for
get
repair.
another. Get three more.
Before you build it, will you take the little white box and will you paint it like Tone Junkie colors?
I should color it in.
Yeah,
you should do
like color
floral.
it in.
Yeah,
that's cool.
I might Goop my Kemper and see if it adds to the tone or
dude.
something.
Yes.
Just depends on how much mid range you want.
How much do you think unopened JHS Goop from the original run is going to be worth? That might be a good reason to not Goop the pedal.
$50 just for the Goop.
Yeah.
On Reverb.
We might get to that point. Original V1 Goop.
Unopened.
Yeah. With the larger serial number in the back.
You say that, and literally on Reverb, I've seen like just boxes for like a Big Muff or a Memory Man, and it's just the box or just the little paper, selling for hundreds of dollars.
You got to get it if you're that kind of person. You got
the JHS thing. He's got the box.
He's got the box.
Yeah.
I mean, if you got to be serious. All right, I want to hear this tube. What is this?
Where did we leave off?
So this is the retro, and this has 3 preamp tubes in it. So this is going to be, in my opinion, the most different out of everything that we've heard.
Interesting.
So this is an extreme example. So it has a switch that does high gain, low gain on it. So this is the high gain to really show you the hitting the tubes.
I freaking love it so far. Fuzzy. I like it.
It's the fuzz. Like the first fuzz was a preamp going bad.
Right.
Wow. Yeah.
I love the history of that stuff, but like the first effect was a preamp going bad.
And they're like, do that again.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So I'll play around with the settings and get it to clean up and then do that. Just for comparison, I'll plug back into the API and go hear that. So that's like a pushed tube preamp. Like it's not really clipping, but it's like edge of breakup. Right. So play that and I'll go to the API.
That doesn't sound bad, but it sounds way less tubular.
Yeah.
It's more focused. It sounds a little more like lo-fi, not in the best way. I thought there was a lot more like, it still had like a breakup quality, but it was a lot like maybe the higher end didn't feel as breathy, natural. Do you know?
You played differently too.
It was definitely more fun to play the first one.
Yeah, and that was the tube like edge of breakup. Yeah. Like I could say that's a guitar term, but it's like gain staging, like you're approaching the level of distorting the preamp. Where this was more on the cleaner side, and I went over there and gained it up.
Yeah. All right, let's hear the Shadow Hill, and then I want to try something. I want to get like a clean edge of breakup tone, and like run through them all.
With like less effects and stuff.
I think the real, we'll do. Let's hear the Shadow Hill, and then I'd love to try something like get them all set up and just run through each. You know what I mean?
So this is the Shadow Hill.
Shadow Hill, yeah. The Shadow Hill is fun because it has the attenuate where you can like pull back and then get it to clean up on the back end, or you can turn the attenuate off and then slam the front end and get that. Okay. And you can also change the transformer on it, which gives a lot of different sounds. So it has, if I can read it, it's nickel, steel, and then the discrete circuit, which all sound, or the transformer, which sounds very different.
That one gets the award for best knobs. Those knobs are something else.
Yeah.
You know, even the clicking, it just feels nice, you know?
Mm-hmm. Those are good knobs.
Yeah. These ones, not as cool. You see those?
Yes. Yeah.
Can we hear all these can we set all these up in can we get like a little edge of breakup tone? Like maybe what's this sound like without the protein?
Like almost just the Ruby, I was thinking.
So this is just Ruby.
Compressors on your board or no?
Yeah. No, it's okay.
Origin, okay, that's fine. I was just
we don't. I don't mind some verb and stuff too. Okay. You got a little light verb. There we go. Yeah. Can we hear all these like with this tone?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, so if you're a modeler guy, is this the part of the rig that's missing? Is the sort of post mic, post IR, can you kind of benefit from the flavor, the feel, the harmonics, the saturation of one of these units?
Yes.
I think that's a real question. Like a lot of people aren't asking. We don't have this stuff modeled, in the Helix, in all of that stuff.
Yeah. So this is like the UA Lion.
Yeah.
And this has everything up until the preamp. Yeah.
We've got the mics going out, and a lot of times this is the part of recorded guitar that it's not really in the conversation right now. So imagine we want to have our tone and we want something to just give us a little more of that signature, feel. Is that a thing people with modelers should be doing? Let's find out. Maybe.
API. Okay.
Okay, favorites?
Man, that's the thing is, what am I recording?
Well, I know, and it's but if you were taking just your rig here, which we've got a Ruby, digital enough, right? You've got a bunch of analog pedals, right? But HX Stomp, Ruby, this could be anything, a Helix, a Kemper.
Yeah.
What would be your always on? Maybe I like the sound of this. Is there anything there? I'll tell you, for me, it was the tube one. What's that called?
This one? Yeah. The Retro.
The Retro.
Yeah.
Now, how did that feel to play? It sounded squishy.
I mean, they all kind of have a little sag and a chunk to them or whatever. But yeah, I mean, that one for sure, that's when I think you asked, does that feel squishy afterwards? I was like, oh, for sure it does,
And that may, I'd run it a little lighter. I'd kind of dial it in for a little bit of like almost not there.
Yeah, because when you played, we were halfway on the gain,
yeah,
which is getting edge of breakup. So you can get this to clean up more.
Can we hear that one a little more? Could you pull that one down? Because that was my favorite. What was your favorite, Suze?
I kind of looked over when I was feeling good about it, and I think it was the one before. I think it was the Rupert Neeve, yeah.
So let's hear this tube one. Maybe we back off the gain a little bit. And what was your favorite, Kevin?
I'm an API guy.
Yeah.
I've done this test over and over again.
Right. Okay, so let's see. I want to hear those three. Let's try. So the tube one, then we'll go 511, the Retro 511, and then to the 512.
So which one's this?
So we're on the tube, the Retro.
And we pulled it back a little bit.
So this is on the cleaner side.
Right. Yeah.
And go to your favorite, the 511.
Yeah, let's hear that 511. I mean, that sounds good to me. Yeah. I could tell it feel wise. How did that Retro feel right there at that gain level?
Yeah. Squishy. Yeah.
So we're on the 511. And this to me is more modern sounding.
Sure.
So it'll be a little tighter, full frequency on everything. Yeah, other thing too is I'll take off the silk circuit, which is adding a lot of goose to it.
There's a lot of different, I'm sure we're going to hear it even more in playback, but just in this room, there's a lot of difference there. Their characters are both like very evident.
Oh, yeah.
I kind of preferred with the silk myself.
I did too.
Yeah.
And I preferred that with the silk to the first one.
And that's what the 511 does is I would probably run the silk on a guitar track, and I would probably not on maybe a really clean vocal track or something. So this is, you can use this for a lot of different. Because that's the do-all
kind of design.
Right.
Yeah. Now let's hear that API, because this is a classic. You know, I kind of, to me, this is the hot sound. You describe this as the American.
This is the American quick transient, no input transformer. It's hitting like this. And for me, that I like how it feels under my fingers. It's all about feel a lot of the times.
I mean, I dig that.
The differences are subtle, but they're, I mean, to me, from where I'm sat through studio monitors over there, but I think I like that one the least. And then that one that you like. And then I still like that Rupert Neve design.
Keep playing on the API. Let me change the gain structure on it.
Yeah.
It felt a little darker, less shimmery to me, which I liked on the 511. Is that what it's called?
Right, yeah. Especially with the breath control. I felt like there was
gravitate towards that. It's almost like changing IRs, you know?
It is.
So that's like getting into the red, and then we can get it up way hot too, and like clip it too.
Yeah,
so
and that clipping's coming from the API,
Yeah, and that's such a sound too. So it's like finding that sweet spot. And we're not clipping the interface or anything. That's only preamp gain because I have the trim pulled way back.
And that's too, like, that reminds me of the sound of a lot of records like that saturated. Yeah. Like, to me, I go like, oh yeah, I would love a rhythm guitar like Phoenix, you know, has that sound. You know, it's just and it has that like that kind of thing. That's what it reminds me of instantly. Or I go, oh, this sounds like, that's what a rhythm guitar track would sound like on a record.
And what I keep hearing is like, I'm not used to these types of sounds just from modelers. Yeah. And so it is adding something that is like we hear on records, but isn't available on what we currently have. Yeah. Which I don't like you, Kevin, because I don't have any more money to spend on any more gear. Well, and now you've come over with this.
And this stuff is dangerous. Guitar players are in the shallow end of the pool when it comes to the cost of this gear.
That is so true.
This stuff gets insane quickly.
Well, that's why JHS made the Colorbox.
Yes.
The Colorbox is a 1073. Like, that's what the Colorbox is. It has EQ, like, it added some things, but it's a 1073 in a pedal.
How do you like that pedal, or I guess preamp in this context?
It's amazing, and that's why you see so many like people that run direct rigs that are like acoustic or bass, and they want to take the sound of a studio sound live. That's why the Colorbox, like people use the JHS Colorbox. It's on so many bass player pedal boards. It's like you hear the bass sounds on the Colony House record, and it's that. And their live rig, they throw a Colorbox down to give you that 1073 sound live.
And then and you go here, and then you know the next thing is like, well, should I run a little compression at the end of my guitar chain? Like, especially if I got the mod, that would be more difficult to do when I'm running an amp. But now that I'm putting the amp on the board, you know, do I use a little post amp compression? We've talked about this a lot in the Kemper, in the Helix. I've got a whole video on the Kemper that says everything I know about the Kemper and compression. And it's just about like using the compressor all over the place and what you're trying to do with it. Right. And it really is everything I can achieve.
That's what Universal Audio did in the pedal form. Is they have these pedals, and then they have the one that's called the Max, and it's stereo in and out compression meant for pedal boards, where you can run studio compression on the pedal board in stereo on the back end.
Like after,
but our brain's not there, right? Like it feels like it goes, well, this will replace my my Armstrong orange squeeze style, compressor. It can.
Yeah.
Right? This will go where my MXR goes. The sort of the polish, of the compression at the end of the signal.
Yeah.
Won't that mess up my dynamic range? Won't I? How will I get edge of breakup tones?
All right, so I have a question.
Yeah.
It's to you, Kevin, but it's also to you, HW, about I guess in a studio or making profiles, right? Sure. So like what we're doing here is we're playing, okay, maybe not here, but if we were playing a Kemper, we would be playing the sound of a mic through a preamp that's here, right? And so
potentially, you don't have to make them that way.
Okay, so say you profiled something with a 1073, and you're going, oh, I got a 1073, and I said, well, I already have that on my signal chain. Mm-hmm. Now we have 2. Yep. Is it just like 3 would be better or 4? You know what I mean? Like we're already hearing the preamp. And so you're saying, no, you got to do it again after the Kemper, out of the Kemper into this. Well, there's already one there. So now there's 2 1073s.
Yeah, go ahead, Kevin.
It's like having a tube amp again in the room.
Okay.
It's like when you play it, you have the feel of it. Mm-hmm. Where in my experience, when you bake that into a capture on the neural or the thing on the it becomes part of the sound and less of the feel.
Okay.
That's the difference to me.
Okay, so it becomes like a sum of its parts when it's the profile.
Right.
It's in there somewhere, but this is really clear what this is doing.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I heard you say. But okay, so like in the studio,
I would say so. Responding to that, I would say like I know Michael Britt is not a fan of preamps on his profiles.
Gotcha. Okay.
So he's using a mixer to mix together mic signals that are direct mic signals and balance them out. So the idea there being we're not imparting any more sound.
Gotcha. Okay.
But, Michael is a successful recording guitar player. Sure. He has what he likes to record with.
Right.
And they've made a lot of records. But to him, it's like, but that's not really part of my guitar rig and he told me one time, because every board has a preamp that I go to. So his thinking is like what you're saying.
Yeah.
Even when I'm playing live, whether they're running plugins or wherever wherever they're playing, they've got a pre there. So he's not trying to mess with it. At least that was, conversation I've had with him.
Yeah.
And that's one way to think about it. And I think there are several people who do it that way. I think Rebet's stuff was like, he did it finished. Like, record this. And I think he put some compression on the end and all that stuff. To me, I would go like this. If you're doing tracks remotely, like I'm thinking, how do you make a record today? Mm-hmm. Kevin's made more records than me, for sure.
In the last 3 months.
I'm guessing. Yeah. But if you're there, to me it goes like, if I make the tracks, the producer just gets those remote guitar tracks that I'm sending in. And I've never had anyone say, by the way, what'd you use? The track is just what it is. And then he's going to do something with it. And I would bet you $1 million you will not find a producer who does nothing to one of the tracks. You got to do something.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
It's psychological. You can't do nothing to it. There's always something you're going to want. Even if it was perfect. Even if in another world it was what you would have made it into.
Yeah.
So
you got to work on it.
So we probably are hearing a lot of this stacking anyway. You know what I mean? I would imagine, it's just happening, and I will agree with you, Kevin. The units have a feel that doesn't pick up all of the gear's feel. There's still a feel on the gear.
Okay.
So maybe it is when we're capturing stuff and we're profiling stuff, we are getting some of that dynamic range, some of that compression, some of the harmonics, but it's within whatever range was kind of optimized for guitar, because most of those capture things are trying to capture guitar stuff.
Yeah.
So that's one thing I've found with the Kemper. You add too much compression, you max out the compression. You find that with fuzz pedals on the Kemper. You find it with fuzz pedals on everything.
Yeah, you can't go
It won't
anymore.
give you that spitty thing. It's too much for a guitar amp calibrated thing. So you won't get that response from it. So why not break the rules? If it sounds good, it is good, right?
And you played differently. When we were slamming the tube pre, you played differently. And then we went through one of the cleaner things. Like your attack changed. That's the thing, is how are we making art? How are we putting together the parts for things? It's like, it's capturing the performance of it. And if these make you perform better, then
inspiring.
Then they're worth their weight in gold.
Yeah.
And that's what they charge for most of these, by the way.
No, bricks of gold.
These are actually, they might really be.
The big thing too is microphones act differently.
Yeah.
You plug a guitar into a fuzz pedal and you have to think about impedance or where your volume's at.
Yes.
It will react differently. When your microphones on stuff will act differently depending on the preamp.
Yeah.
It's the impedance, everything about that changes.
That's good. I'm definitely doing the thing that you said about trying the free trials. I'm going to record stuff with a Kemper,
right,
and then just throw these on after, and see how it sounds.
Yeah.
That's what I love about this podcast is that we've really had a lot of fun when we outlast the camera batteries.
They don't have 4 hours worth of recording.
You know what I think it is? I store a lot of them on the charger, and I think that's degraded them significantly because I can never figure out why sometimes they...
Is this audio only right now?
We're there.
It's just like a black screen. Maybe Kevin's face is on there.
So is that one dead?
They're both dead. It's probably just B-roll at this point.
Okay.
But that's, if you made it this far.
It's got the Vintage King website on there.
You were watching.
Shameless plug. You can do this shootout over at my studio in East Nashville.
I was going to say, Suze, you can go over there and do this.
I feel like I'm going to be
You can bring your pedal board.
Afternoons there.
And we could shoot that, actually.
Yeah,
I'd be down. I want to know. I want to know what you would pick because as someone who is now debating bringing the Chroma console basically next to my Kemper when I go play anywhere.
Sure, I'm
basically going, okay, I'm going to get away from one unit. It's one unit, but I'm going to just set this thing up next to it. Once I break that barrier,
I
might as well bring 10 pieces of gear.
Sky's the limit. Yeah.
You're
going to have like a real tape delay sitting out there kind of like half broken.
So, it's going to, you're right.
Why
real
not?
EP.
Yeah, just sitting there
EP2.
running. Yeah.
Once upon a time, I used to use an EP2 that had no tape in it just for the preamp.
Wow. That was not recently, I'm guessing. Yeah.
No, this was over a decade ago.
Goodness.
This has been fun. Kevin, thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for coming,
Kevin.
This has been episode of 11. I think this is episode Guitar Friends 11. I think we can call this one safely in the books. This is interesting.
It really is.
And I don't know that I was ready to open up a whole... Because I'm not a stranger to these.
You've got them.
And I know how my stuff works. I have a couple more APIs. I am a big fan of these Heritage Audio. These are like Neeves, right?
Those are like 1073s.
And I like this 2V on guitar stuff. I did some of the earliest stuff with Tone Junkie on this, and then I got away from them, and then I started listening to older stuff, and then I plugged this back in, and I went, "Oh, that's what that sound is."
Yeah,
it's just part of the sound. Yeah.
And so, and I have some Cappy stuff, but you kind of know how it's like Guitar Pellet. You know how your stuff reacts, but you go to the candy shop, and it's a million things,
right?
So. That's that. Kevin, love to have you back. Maybe we'll stop by the shop and try some of these out.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Yeah, come by Vintage King. We can do this for anybody.
Right.
So it's getting the sound of the record.
That's awesome.
That's rad.
That's awesome. All right. HW.
Suze.
Kevin Schuck.
Out of here. Later.